Turning now to politics, sparks flying at the third GOP presidential debate last night in Miami. The candidates attacked each other, pushing for second place while attempting to take on the faraway frontrunner, Donald Trump. But overshadowing it all was yet another stunning election defeat for Republicans, pushing abortion rights back into the spotlight front and center. Here to discuss this and more is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Happy almost Friday.
We need it, right? Well, listen, this is the morning after the third GOP debate, coming one day after these stunning losses for Republicans in those key swing states. What stood out to you? Who won the night, if anyone?
Well, I think Nikki Haley did a great job, but they all were much more going after each other and Donald Trump than we've seen in previous debates. I thought that moment where Vivek Ramaswamy actually discussed Nikki Haley's daughter and her use of social media, which then prompted Haley to call him scum, was a moment. But they all agreed on strong support for Israel. They disagreed on funding for Ukraine. They disagreed on a few other issues like abortion or how strong that stance should be. But overall, I thought Nikki Haley came out on top last night.
Very interesting. Abortion, as you said, at front and center of this debate. DeSantis doubling down on pro-life policies, while Haley softened her stance. Is that the right way to go now? Does the Republican Party change its views on abortion after yet another election defeat?
Great question, Giselle. I don't think so. I think what happened in Virginia was very telling. So Glenn Youngkin, even though he wasn't running, he was going around the state and trying to soften the stance on abortion, moving from a 6-week abortion ban to a 15-week abortion ban and talking about it as a restriction rather than a ban. And you saw what happened in Virginia. Both houses of the legislature are now Democratic. We saw this in states, across the country, whether it was the Kentucky gubernatorial race or whether it was in Ohio. Ohio is now the 8th state to support abortion rights. And these are some pretty deep red states here. And so I think at the end of the day, there's nothing that Republicans can do to soften an abortion stance that is simply out of step with about 85% of Americans.
Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy also had some heated exchanges, especially when it came to foreign policy. Vivek also attacked the moderators, aid to Ukraine, Zelensky, and President Biden, who he called on to step aside. Take a listen.
I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up so we can have an honest debate. Biden should step aside, end his candidacy now so we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else. All right, just tell us the truth so we can have an honest debate.
A bold statement after Democrats win big in Ohio, Virginia, and even Kentucky. So what's the disconnect between Biden's low approval rating and the Democratic Party, Caroline?
Well, I'll say a year out, this is a really common thing with incumbents. We saw this with Ronald Reagan. We saw this with Barack Obama. And then they handily won re-election. It is very common for incumbent presidents to have a low approval ratings. And what will happen is we will see the race tighten. And by the way, Donald Trump also has low approval ratings. And I'm not saying this to somehow defend Biden. I think the conversation we're having about him doesn't look into the fact that this is pretty common this far out. And what I anticipate will happen is, as it's probably a Biden-Trump matchup, the race will get much closer. With that said, bread and butter issues, the economy is what is really killing Biden right now in the polls, and also his age. 71% of Democrats are concerned about that.
Yeah, and it's a year out, and you don't know, and certainly there's trust in polls is very down, but it does beg the question, and people kept talking about Gavin Newsom flying around the world to China, on the national stage, taking on DeSantis. You've got Gretchen Whitmer's name being tossed around, waiting in the wings. Michelle Obama is a new one. But at what point does the DNC make that call and step in if these numbers continue the way they're going?
I don't think the DNC is going to step in. I think the only person who could really make that decision would be Biden, and it would be unprecedented for someone to give up power like that. It is not. So I will say that Trump loses in a generic ballot in key swing states, and Biden is now losing to Trump in key swing states. Again, it's a year out, and I would expect that this race will actually be very tight. And I don't know what would cause Biden to step down, but I can't imagine it being anything short of a major health emergency.
So Trump once again did not attend this debate, holding more counter-programming down the road. He's up 50 points in some polls, which does beg the question, do these debates even matter, or is this all just a battle for second place or vice president?
Yeah, these debates don't really matter. Donald Trump is the most likely nominee. We've never seen a party coalesce around one leader so early on in the modern political era. Certainly, they're running for the vice presidency. There are other folks in the mix as well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. They definitely want to break out and be considered for number two, especially since Mike Pence is obviously not going to be the choice for Donald Trump this time around. But he is just so far up in whether it's key swing states, whether it's national polls. Donald Trump, unless something really drastic happens, has this in the bag.
Yeah, his message of "I'm being indicted for you" at last night's rally is really his narrative moving forward, and it's working for him. So foreign policy, a major sticking point in last night's debate, and aid to Israel, to Ukraine, front and center, these being held up in the House, being attached to other Republican demands. What's at stake here if this aid does not get passed?
Well, it's part of the larger issue, right, of whether or not the government stays open and the continuing resolution. I would anticipate that given the strong support for Ukraine aid with Republicans in the Senate, that something will get passed. I think the biggest, what we will see, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has presented a new approach where he wants to do like mini government shutdowns. So shut down some programs through January and then fund them maybe at that point in time. It's hard to say what will happen, but what we do know, I think, is the conversation is going to narrow down to border security, because that is where Republicans in both the House and the Senate agree. And I think that will be the sticking point for negotiations with Democrats.
All this while there's still this looming government shutdown just 8 days now away. Speaker Johnson yet to decide if he will pass a continuing resolution. Does he get it done, Caroline, or face the same fate as McCarthy?
It is so hard to say. I mean, certainly the exact same forces are at play, but it appears that Matt Gaetz and other more extremists are willing to give him a little more grace. So I have more optimism than I did with McCarthy.
Listen, I'll take any optimism from you in these political times. Thank you so very much, Caroline. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Thank you always for coming on with your expert analysis. We appreciate you.